All right, so I am in a YouTube war, akin to like a rap battle, apparently, with a YouTuber named Discourse Politics. By the way, go check out his video if you want to see the entire video of of his response to my video earlier. So I'll put a link in the description. Okay, so here's the deal, right? I debunked this myth about the red wagon and how it was Democrats were secretly sneaking in these ballots in the middle of the night in Michigan, right? When it turns out it was just camera equipment, right? Okay, so Discourse Politics made a reply video to me, and he said, "Listen, you didn't address any of the issues. Okay, you talked about the ballots, these that the red wagon had camera equipment." He said, "You know what? I'll take your word for it. It was just camera equipment." But Dante, why didn't you discuss any of the other issues, like the ballot issue, right? Why is it that ballots are coming in? More and more ballots are coming in for Biden. It seems like. Well, why is the count different? And why was the lawyer in the video, a Republican lawyer, prevented from watching the count? And why were other people prevented from watching the count? Other Republicans prevented from watching the count? Can you address the issues? All right. So first, I'm going to play what he has to say, and then I'm going to address each issue one by one. And hopefully it'll be satisfying to him. Hopefully it'll be satisfying to you. And maybe if you're a Republican watching this, I can help debunk some of these myths that have been occurring around this election process, mainly intentionally, right? The GOP have been intentionally sowing distrust in this election. And this has been a plan for many, many months. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit too. So first, let's hear what he had to say about me personally. This is some good stuff, actually.
Are you man enough to admit that you created that same logical fallacy, that you selectively edited my video and you didn't address the major points of the video, which, by the way, that was a 20-minute video and you took like a 2-minute section of it. Why? Because the rest of the video you can't disprove. She was kicked out from being able to observe the area. Other lawyers who were also on the Republican side were kicked out of the area to observe. They put whiteboard over the windows so you couldn't observe. There were people going in and out in an unsecure fashion into a secure area. The ballots originally were 16,000. According to her, there were 16,000 that they had to count. Then by 10 a.m., it was 30,000. Shortly thereafter, it was 35. Shortly after that, it was 120,000. You don't address any of that. And the reason you don't is because you were dishonest with yourself from the beginning. You took a small portion of this video and thought, aha, I'm going to make a video about this because it proves my point. You jumped to a conclusion. And the funny thing is, not only did she say it looked like a box, basically saying she wasn't sure.
Okay. So that's not that part is really. He does say some really good stuff after this, but so let's stop there. Okay. So the first thing, why did it seem like so many ballots were coming in for Biden? Now, this exact argument that there was just more and more ballots to count. Like I'm not aware of that. I haven't heard that story yet. But as far as the votes shifting massively towards Biden, I want to explain that. And I want to talk about why it may look like there was this huge abundance of absentee ballots and where did they come from and why was there so many? And why did they all favor Biden, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is just the ridiculous amount of absentee ballots in Michigan this year. This is the largest turnout we've ever had in any election. Joe Biden received more votes than any any candidate in U.S. history. And Donald Trump received more votes than any candidate in U.S. history besides Joe Biden in this election. That's how many votes were cast. And the same were true in Michigan, right? Michigan had a huge turnout. And roughly 2/3 of Michigan votes were cast early. So mail-in ballots accounted for a ridiculous amount. 3 million Michigan residents requested absentee ballots. So I want to start there just to let everyone know, like there was a huge amount of absentee ballots this year. The election was huge. But what happened though? Why were mail-in ballots in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania counted so late? if you pause to think about it, why would you count early ballots after same day election ballots? Like, didn't you already have those ballots? Why weren't you counting those ballots beforehand? A prime example of the correct way to handle this situation would be Arizona. So Arizona had overwhelming absentee ballots, right? I mean, they had a lot. They had early vote. But 1 hour after the polls closed in Arizona, they released all the early vote count. Why? In Arizona, they were able to count the vote early, right? And actually, you see Trump catching up in Arizona because the votes counted were basically the same day votes or the same day drop-off ballots, right? So in Arizona, it looks like Trump is catching up, right? More of the votes favoring Trump. Now, in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, all three of these states have a GOP legislature. And all three legislatures decided that they were going to count early votes last. Why? Because Donald Trump, all summer long, was saying how the mail-in votes were going to be shady. And these legislatures actually helped that along. Take Pennsylvania. The Republican-controlled legislature refused to change state law to allow county officials to start processing mail-in ballots until 7 a.m. on election day. So why are we suffering right now through 3 days worth of vote count? Because the Republican-controlled legislature followed Donald Trump's game plan, which was, if we lose Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin, perhaps we can use the Supreme Court or the courts in general to stop counting those absentee ballots. It's a childish plan. It's a ludicrous plan. It was never going to work. But Donald Trump, instead of trying to win the election outright, he spent a lot of time over this summer on this scheme to disenfranchise the American voter. And even now he's trying to do it by claiming voter fraud and claiming this and claiming that with no evidence. So that's why I attacked the Red Wagon story, because that's probably some of the best evidence they have of voter fraud, because there was none this election. Or they don't have any proof yet. So that is why mountains of absentee ballots were left to process on top of the in-person vote. And by the way, I don't know this particular story he said where, oh, well, first there was 10,000, then 20, then 100,000. But what I do know is that it was very hard to predict outstanding ballots this election, because there was way higher turnout than ever before. Nobody I don't think anyone thought that there would be like 15 to 20 million more people voting in this election. Did you? I didn't. So that might help explain why they kept getting the estimates wrong, because they severely underestimated how many people were actually going to vote in this election. Could be, right? Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about what happened, why they boarded up the windows here. Take a look at this. Stop the count! Stop the count! Stop the count! Stop the count! So people from the public, just random Trump supporters, walked up to where the vote count were being held and started banging on the windows. Stop the count! Stop the count! And let me tell you, if you're ever on the political side of the spectrum and your argument is to stop the count and disenfranchise the American people, you're on the wrong side of this issue, okay? If your go-to move is to just like, okay, if we don't count the votes, we win, like something is like, no. That's as anti-democratic as it gets. And on the other side of this area right here, there are plenty of Republican watchdogs, right? There are plenty of Republicans and members of even the Trump team Trump had representatives in every single state watching the ballots being counted. They couldn't interfere in the count, but they could watch the count. In fact, one of the only legal battles that the Trump campaign has won was, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, actually, wasn't it? Yeah, I think it was. They said that they want to observe, they want 6 feet and not 12 feet to observe the count. That's it. You can observe the count, you just can't interfere in the count, right? And they're allowed to observe the count everywhere, right? But what was the situation here specifically at this TCF? It was capacity. There were so many people observing on the other side of this barrier here, right? That they were over capacity on both sides. Actually, on this side of the barrier and where the protesters are, they were over capacity. And you got to imagine too, there was a global pandemic in which today, literally today, was the most American citizens infected by COVID this year. We set a new record today. 1,200 people died today of COVID. 1,200 died today. And here these people are screaming shoulder to shoulder, stop the count. Let's end democracy because we want our guy to win. Come on, man. It's ridiculous. No, Joe Biden did not magically find votes. Joe Biden never found votes, okay? But what happened was, and you can read these articles for yourself, by the way. But what happened was, and here's the guy covering the windows. Why? Because they don't want to be intimidated, okay? They don't want these creepy protesters banging on the wall saying stop the vote. They're literally just covering up, not so they couldn't see inside, but so that the workers couldn't see them. But that's not hard to understand. But Fox News only shows this part. They don't show the part where they're covering it up because of the protesters. Now, there was one thing I got wrong in my original video, and that was regarding the timing of the count. I actually got the TCF Center confused with Nevada, because in Nevada, they actually did. Now, I actually read some articles that said, no, they didn't stop counting in Nevada too. But 2 days ago, they stopped counting in Nevada for a day and they covered the machines with cloths. So I got Michigan and Nevada confused. So I did make a mistake there. I'll admit that. I don't know if they ever stopped counting the vote in Michigan. So I might have been wrong there. Yeah. But all of this, I mean, this is ridiculous, man. This protest, stop the vote, stop. They were shouting stop the vote when Donald Trump was behind. They didn't understand that they needed to keep counting the votes. So an advisor to Trump actually told Trump, because he tweeted out stop the count, and an advisor said, no, you don't understand, Mr. President. We're behind. Especially in Arizona, right? So we just say stop the fraud. Say stop the fraud. Don't say stop the vote. So ironically, these guys were cheering when Donald Trump was already behind. I mean, chanting when Donald Trump was already behind.
Sure. I even said the same thing. You gloss over that fact. You gloss over that fact, and she was kicked out from watching ballots being counted.
Okay, so why was she kicked out and other lawyers kicked out? So I think I addressed that already. It was capacity. All right, it wasn't because they were trying to hide anything. There were already plenty of observers there. You didn't need more and more and more observers, because you know why they wanted so many observers? To intimidate the vote counters. That's not cool, man. It's not. I mean, that's not the way it's done. And of course, I stand by what I said about her trying to find evidence of voter fraud when there was none. I stand by that. Now you look. Maybe I was a little rude by calling her stupid. All right. I mean, she's probably a pretty intelligent lady. And if she is intelligent, that makes her actions even worse because she intentionally was trying to trick people, right? So the truth is, I mean, look, if you can provide evidence of voter fraud anywhere in any state, provide it. Look, I'm open-minded. I'll change my mind. But there has literally been zero evidence of voter fraud. Okay, so what did we cover today? Let me just summarize. First of all, the Republican legislatures made sure that the Democratic vote count would be last, right? And think about it this way: Donald Trump actually organized this entire thing, right? So first, he said, no, vote in person, don't vote by mail. He spent 3-4 months telling people that mail-in votes are scams, they're not to be trusted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The GOP legislatures in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, they all decided not to change the rules this year, and that we could only count absentee ballots at 7 a.m. on election day. Right. And so then when the in-person vote favors Trump, that'll be counted first. So it'll look like Trump has this huge lead. And then almost all the Democratic balance will be overwhelmingly Democratic. And Donald Trump was hoping for this exact scenario to play out. And if he ever was behind, or if he ever threatened to be behind, he was hoping for some injunction to stop the count and to somehow throw out ballots. His plan was, you could see it coming from a mile away. You could see it coming in slow motion. It was never going to work, but he tried it. He just telegraphed his punch, that's all. And I don't think anybody should fall for it. I don't think that anyone in America should fall for this ridiculous, amateurish political stunt that Donald Trump is trying to pull. But by the way, if there is any evidence of voter fraud, okay, look, they have several lawsuits going in several states. If there's any evidence, they'll provide it and they'll overturn the results. So do not hold your breath for that, okay? Let me see if there's anything else I forgot to cover.
The fact that other lawyers on the Republican side were kicked out of watching the ballots. The fact that there was only supposed to be about 18,000 absentee ballots that were turned in on the day of election.
So turned in on the day of election. So 18,000. So I'm getting confused at what's going on here. So I just don't know what you're talking about. So that's why I can't really respond 100% to this. But there were 3 million absentee ballots requested. So that's all I have to say about that. No one should be surprised by how many were actually turned in. So,
which by 10 a.m. the next day became 35 or became 30.
Yeah,
then
I just don't know
votes they had to count.
About
It's 100% true that that's all fictional and that's all false, and that there was no valid reason for that to happen, because there might be an explanation for it. But the thing is that you're not intellectually curious about it because...
No, I'm not intellectually curious about it because nobody has shown me any evidence of voter fraud. See, I would be very intellectually curious. So look, if you have a premise, there has been voter fraud in this election, what you then need to do is back up that premise with evidence, right? So after you back up your statement with evidence, then I can look at that statement and then I, right, can respond to it one way or another. Right? But you cannot just state something as, oh, this looks fishy, this looks like it could be voter fraud, and then provide no evidence. That isn't how argumentation works, right? I mean, if it is, I mean, I could say the same. I could just make up stuff too. Like, you know, if we're in the business of just making up crap, I can make up lots of stuff too, okay? But that isn't how things work. All right. And and the proof is Donald Trump's legal challenges are getting tossed out left and right because he doesn't have any evidence of anything. One of the arguments that the Trump lawyers made was they didn't have meaningful observers. In one of the states, they said, you know what qualified as meaningful? They didn't provide us with binoculars. That's how ludicrous the arguments are. There was no voter fraud here. He always planned. You look, honestly, anyone watching this video knows Donald Trump planned to announce voter fraud no matter what, even if he won. You know how I know? In 2016 when he won, but Clinton won the popular vote, he said, no, it was voter fraud. Mexicans came over, illegal Mexicans voted for Clinton. They even had a panel commission. They found no evidence of voter fraud in 2016, none. But he claimed voter fraud then too. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this video up. I don't know, hopefully I covered all the issues I was supposed to cover. Let me know if there was anything I left out. Oh, no, there definitely was one thing, because you said that you said I committed the same logical fallacy when I assumed she was stupid and that she was waiting outside for hours and hours and hours or something. I don't know. But listen. She went down there at 3 a.m., parked outside. She was hoping to find something suspicious. All right, look, that's elite. Okay, all right, look. She was looking for something, right? I mean, she even said it in the video. She said, I went down there, I was watching TV, I saw some stuff, I went down there to observe. I found something that looked suspicious. You know, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So she went down there looking for something suspicious. And so she found something suspicious, which was a red wagon that contained camera equipment. She didn't know what was in the box. She assumed they were ballots. That's what I mean by leaping to conclusions and having a logical fallacy. That's all I mean by that. I don't know what's hard to understand about that.
Because you jump to conclusions. And that is why it is very difficult to have an honest conversation with the insufferable, intolerable, arrogant, sanctimonious left. They simply don't exist in the real world, and the world that they do exist in are little snippets of other people being wrong and them being right.
So we don't live in the real world because we demand evidence before we support someone else's conclusions. Listen, if you provide evidence for anything you have to say, right? If the evidence looks good, if it's trustworthy, right? I'll accept that, okay? But when you start to post conspiracy theories with no evidence to back up your conspiracies, that's when I challenge it. That's all. That's it. That's it. If that's why it's hard to talk to a liberal, well, then it's going to be hard to talk to a liberal because we demand evidence for stuff. You know, and we wouldn't accuse Republicans of fraud without evidence. Right? Would we? Have we? Why is it that Joe Biden was the only candidate saying count all the votes in a democracy? And Donald Trump literally said all the legal votes are for the legal votes are for me, the illegal votes are for the other guy. What? What is he talking about? If you count the legal votes, what illegal votes is he talking about? Does he have any evidence of that whatsoever? Of course not. He just makes it up. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up. I mean, hopefully I touched on everything. Let's see. Was there anything else?
Technically a registered Democrat at the moment, they almost always fail. And those in mind. Number one, they have to accurately and truthfully describe the problem. Number two, they have to present a clear plan on how to fix the problem. And number three, listen carefully to objections and address them in a meaningful way. Let's see if Don...
Okay, wait. I want to talk about that real quick because he talked about the problem. Yeah, there is no problem. We had an election. There was no voter. The election went off way smoother than it probably should have, considering 140 million people voted this election. You know, in normal, considering 140 million people voted this election, the the biggest irregularity was like 6,000 votes in Michigan from a machine. That's the biggest hiccup out of 140 million that we have so far this election. There is no problem. The only problem is that the Republicans are just making up claims of fraud without providing any evidence. So there is no way to address this. The solution is stop trying to destroy the public's confidence in an election that hasn't had many problems. That's the solution. All right, so you want me, the liberal, to give you a solution? Stop making up problems that don't exist. Or if you do have statements of voter fraud or whatever, provide evidence. Bottom line. That's it. Like, share, subscribe. Hopefully I answered all your questions. If I didn't, please let me know. And I'm going to wrap this video up. This is 25 minutes of me talking about this. But yeah, like, share, subscribe.